we have an uncontrolled source, or they're not things that are, like, you have to do something immediately, right?
Well,
Well,
that's,
because they're captured as imminent hazards
Yeah.
right now, so by the time you do a substantial hazard evaluation at temporary solution or at ROS, if you had a short-term risk, theoretically you caught it because of 321, and it would have been notified as a 2-hour. So that's, if the idea is to take some of those things out at 321, you then would need another reason to evaluate them before you
Probably
got
won't
to.
be that many.
I have a risk.
Well, the soil.
That- I mean,
So,
that's-
I have a question for the risk assessors. If you go back to indoor air, and you go to PCE, especially with the change in.
Non-cancer drives that.
Okay, so non-cancer.
Now,
Yes,
but
for
it
the
didn't used
short
to.
one.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
now all your imminent hazards indoor air will be PCE, PCBs.
Okay,
NASA.
so then you would still be capturing PCE as an imminent hazard because it's non-cancer. So that doesn't fall out of this.
Well, it depends on the time
It
period.
depends on how you define
Yeah.
it.
And the concentration.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the concentration.
Well, I guess that's the question I'm asking, which is if you're only looking at non-cancer, because you're saying for imminent hazard, you're only looking at non-cancer, and you would be excluding cancer risk. Yes? Wasn't
Not
that what you said,
necessarily,
Lois?
no, I mean, you could do that.
No, but I mean, for the ones we're good
Right,
at,
well, then
I
I thought-
think
I
we usually
thought-
encounter that.
So what conditions would shift to the longer term?
I guess that's what I'm
Yeah.
asking, in
That would be
in
good to-
contaminants
May
that,
not be
Yeah.
that-
in the
Right,
world
that's what I was trying to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
at.
not
Like,
saying
what are the
hypothetical.
things we need to
Which
know
are
about
the
now
things that
versus-
What are we
move?
really talking about?
Yeah.
Right, what are you
That
talking
Brass
about?
tacks.
happens
Yeah.
frequently.
Right.
Paul,
Because TC is captured.
Can I just ask this just to kind of set the, we don't have to answer it now, but I guess we need to understand how that short list in 321 was developed, how those chemicals made that list to know what the department thinks are the significant hazards, imminent hazards. We need to know that foundation, sort of understand how things have changed over time, understanding toxicology, and to help us firm up that list or add to the list or expand it or reduce it, whatever's going to happen to it. I don't have a bias either way. I think more information is better than less.
I think it was just a combination of prevalence and toxicity, or
Prevalence.
what we knew about prevalence and toxicity at that time. So there might have been, I mean, we could have had dioxin on the list, but we didn't
Right,
figure that out,
Right.
Okay, look at me, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do.
But I think
So,
the answer to
okay,
the question we were asking,
examples, I
was, what's in the real world? What moves from one category to another?
Yeah.
So let's, I would work this out. So, I'm doing this. ad
On the
hoc.
fly?
Yes.
Look at all these good
So
questions.
let's look at, first PC.
Yep.
PC tetrachloroethylene would, does have non-cancer effects. So there is likely a concentration that would still pose an imminent hazard, correct?
Yeah, it's pretty high.
So-
It's gonna be much higher.
So
PC
I think
is
it's
now-
close up.
Every chemical is not.
PC, so let's say that in 2016, that concentration X is an imminent hazard, okay?
Let's pretend it's 100 in a workplace.
It's about a.
Okay, no, this is right now with cancer risk.
Oh.
What would cancer risk number for imminent hazard for PCB?
PCE,
PCE.
88.
That's why
I was gonna say
that's why I say
83.
X.
Yeah.
Let's just go with
that.
that. Or
X is good.
if I write this on the board and just saying that these are just made up
Yes,
numbers,
made up.
That's okay.
would that be okay?
You're on record for that.
Okay.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, I know, well, that's my biggest
Say
fear.
like 80 or.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think it's 80.
right now, let's say it's 80 micrograms
It's for the workplace,
per cubic meter.
Well, no.
for the home.
Well, let's say for the home for now.
Yeah.
This is residential imminent hazard, okay?
Uh-huh.
Cancer, and this is based on cancer. Future, it would be based on non-cancer, the imminent hazard would be based on non-cancer risk.
Right. Janet and Lisa are saying that that number now is based on non-cancer. That's the driver. That's what these
I
guys are
thought,
saying. Yes, no, what you, Joe, do you remember?
They changed the
I think you
top
hit the
side.
non-cancer
Yeah.
before you hit cancer, I think.
Yeah,
No, I believe,
No,
I believe PCE is driven by cancer right now.
PCE?
PCE.
There's gonna be a lot of
I
discussion.
thought,
Yeah, I'm not saying we can have
I
this all
think
now.
they're close.
I guess I'm
but-
just saying
close.
that there's some, we need to understand sort of, like I say, prevalence and toxicity, and that's gonna change as emerging contaminants will change prevalence, and toxicity factors are changing, and certain chemicals are not on the
So
list.
it's, there,
But if PCE is driven by non-cancer, and PCE is driven by non-cancer, that captures like 90% of the universe for indoor air that we're concerned about. And those will stay the way they are. Is that a correct statement?
if that,
Right.
anything based on non-cancer would stay the same. So the different, the
it's
main
really different
difference.
the arsenic, like we.
So I guess one way of looking at this is that we have multiple tools for action. Some are here, CEP, we're in
Just measurable levels.
soil, in
Above TVs.
drinking water, in drinking water,
I'm gonna say that to like.
in indoor air, measurable levels
Above TVs.
are critical exposure pathways. And that gets to kind of the underlying, if people are exposed, if people are exposed, there should be quicker action than if there's contamination where nobody is exposed, right?
Yes, Paul.
Yes. If people are exposed to higher levels, there should be quicker action than if they're exposed to lower levels. So the extremes are people are exposed to high levels, and they're actually exposed, faster action than if there are low levels and people aren't exposed. So it all kind of gets
Or high levels.
well. So those are kind of the two parameters: exposed, not exposed, high levels, low levels, high risk, low risk.
I feel like I'm Matrix.
I know. I feel a matrix coming on. We have CEP as a trigger for action. We have imminent hazard levels as trigger for action. We currently do not have substantial hazards as triggers for action, although they could be. Anything else we have for trigger for action? Or immediate action?
Well, 2 within 72-hour conditions.
The other two, the other notification, which are not necessarily
There's other
exposure.
SRM conditions that aren't CEP.
Yeah, so it's kind of weighing all of those. So one of the things that we can play out in this are the examples of kind of, if we're ruling out the imminent hazard, if we're retaining imminent hazards based on non-cancer risk, what are the things that would fall out of that, and kind of play out that. And would they be captured by other criteria? And certainly for CEP, that would affect non-imminent hazard exposures to chemicals. Would certainly be triggered, even if they weren't substantial hazards, they could come in as required action. So that kind of, if you take those away, the big effects would probably be soil, because they're not CEP conditions. For carcinogens, where you might see that separation. So for things like PCBs, let's focus on PCBs in soil as being one of the elements. So you have PCBs in soil higher than the non-cancer risk-based levels, but lower than the non-cancer risk-based levels, but higher than the cancer risk-based levels. So you could have a substantial hazard. You could eventually have a substantial hazard, not an imminent hazard in soil. It doesn't otherwise trigger a CEP, so that's kind of the PCBs in superficial soil would be one of those situations that may fall into this category. And what we would want is, if there are PCBs in superficial soil, and the levels are high enough, we would want earlier action rather than later action.
I actually think.
For
they're by
current
non-cancer.
exposures.
For current exposures.
They have to be
for current-
actual and they have to be
current-
current.
That's why I said superficial, so.
Right,
yes.
Lisa
I
said
think it's
that,
actually the non-cancer with the values that DP use ends up driving a lot of the BCD risk.
It's, yeah, they're close, I think they flip when you go to an imminent hazard evaluation. So it might not be the
So-
best example.
Yeah,
But I think the
Okay.
thing,
Arsenic,
but no,
okay?
I think the thing to keep in mind is that any chemical has a cancer risk, and where cancer risks are generally driving the long-term considerations, all of those chemicals have non-cancer risks. And
Right.
some of them have non-cancer risks that occur at a very high level, and some of them have non-cancer risks that occur at levels that aren't too far away from the cancer risk. So it's going to be a more complicated look at the relative toxicities for different endpoints, I think, in figuring out how we categorize these things and which lists we put them in, or whether we put them in both imminent hazard and substantial hazard.
So one of the tasks that we have that would be in kind of looking to see whether a change is appropriate, needed, justified, and if so, how we would want it to play out, would be going through that and doing evaluation of kind of what would be, if we looked at the world in this way, what would be imminent hazard levels versus substantial hazard levels. And which would be interesting, we would have to do that anyway if we wanted to kind of identify lists of substantial hazard levels versus imminent hazard levels. So, kind of,
At a minimum, we have to update the existing imminent hazard.
yeah. So as part of this, we do have to update that list at 0321. So as a kind of an aside to our discussion, okay, other things that we will be looking for comment on in the long term as because of these potential regulations are looking at that list. Updating numbers would be relatively straightforward and easy. The more interesting questions would be, should those, and those are conditions that could pose an imminent hazard, so it triggers actions, the least of which would be to evaluate whether in fact they do pose an imminent hazard, or just respond to it. So questions would be, right now it's a short list of chemicals, primarily metals plus PCBs in soil. The eternal question is, should it be expanded? Should there be different chemicals on that list? Should there be different lists?
For different media?
For different media. Should there be, if we go down this road with imminent and substantial hazards having separate evaluations, should it be then duplicated but with a substantial hazard list, potentially imminent hazard list? Are those lists best done in regulation? If they're not in regulation, what are the impacts, effects, how would they be used?
Well, I mean, right off the bat, because I've seen this in other states, the second we start putting the lists in regulation, then they become standards, and that's very problematic, because as toxicity information comes about, and it's a moving target, and there can be site-specific considerations that, for example, for PCE and indoor air, I'll just use this example, we find at lots of places that it's not related to subsurface contamination because it's in lots of consumer goods and products and scented candles, etc. And so you could be above a quote standard if you put it in regulation, but it might not be really related to subsurface or only partially related. So then you get in this big conundrum. So I'm personally not advocating that you start putting trigger numbers in regulation, because as things change or if there are site-specific conditions, it can become very problematic if you don't meet those standards
I
for
also
that
think
reason.
with more complex situations, such as indoor air, having trigger numbers.
Lines of code, because it's lines of evidence.
Right,
Right.
it undermines the whole lines of evidence
But-
approach.
Is there a way that you could have, I don't know, either in text or a list of constituents, like if you have these constituents, in these media, you need to, definitely run a substantial hazard evaluation.
Isn't that the way it's framed now, though? It's.
Yeah.
But it's not a list, I mean, you have a list, but it's not actually the best list.
So that's an interesting option. So what I'm hearing is that having the number, the conditions, the chemical, and the concentration becomes problematic because those concentrations then become the de facto standard, and it plays out. So that's questionable whether you can build enough caveat language around that and whether that would work or not. I mean, we've had 0321, that section in there, and because we have other standards for those chemicals,
It's very narrow.
and that's very narrow, I don't think that section has kind of fulfilled the greatest fears about
Right.
how they could be abused. But if you expanded it,
Right.
more media, more chemicals, perhaps that would, maybe we could contain it and caveat it enough so it wouldn't. But the option of having a similar section that has the conditions and the chemicals, but not the concentration in regulations, saying, if you have these situations, you have PCBs